Welcome back, everyone. It's time now to get you in on the discussion. We're going to be taking your questions from Twitter, from Facebook, as well as email, and we have some good ones, so let's go ahead and get started. And our first one concerns the topic that we talked about, the National Driver's License, the Real ID Act. This question says, why is a driver's license not a good enough form of ID going forward? Could we ever have a national driver's license that people in every state receive? At this point, John, do we know exactly? We don't really know how this is going to be implemented. So if we don't have, if states aren't doing the same thing, it sort of defeats the purpose, right?
Makes perfect sense what you're saying, Shauna. I mean, with all the different states, I mean, we have a tradition in our country of each state being able to do what it needs to do for its own citizens as it deems appropriate. I mean, look at Colorado just and Washington State just passing the marijuana laws, but the federal government is at odds with that.
Yeah.
So it's up in the air. It's unclear.
It's unclear what's going to happen. Next question says, I live more than 75 miles away from my ex-husband with our child, but less than 150 miles away. With the law changing, will I be grandfathered? And explain exactly what this person is talking about.
Thank you, Shauna. Sure. Act 627, which is a 16-page document, and obviously we won't be able to discuss all the provisions here, deals with the relocation of a child by a mom or a dad to another venue, maybe another state, depending if they live on the edge of Louisiana. It might be to Pascagoula, Mississippi. That might be 75 miles, depending on if they live in Pearl River or Slidell. Okay. So it just varies. But to answer the person's question, this act will only apply prospectively. It won't go back and change if somebody's living in Pascagoula now, and the one parent's in Pascagoula and one is in Slidell. Not all those cases are going to go to the court. It's only the ones for the future where a parent wants to relocate, not has relocated.
So for those of us who are not well versed in exactly what the relocation law is, this is more restrictive, correct?
It's a shorter distance. I wouldn't quite classify it as more restrictive, but one could. Yeah.
It's a shorter distance.
Yes, ma'am.
So now it's going from 150 miles to 75 miles. So what essentially has to happen? I have to get permission, or what exactly is going on
the
here?
Status that you, if we're talking about you as a parent, has with respect to the current court order, meaning the current custody order, then you would be obligated, depending on the circumstances, as reflected in the 16-page document, to give notice to the other parent in a timely fashion.
If I may, because I think just to make sure everybody's keeping up, we changed gears. We're talking about family law. We're talking about child custody arrangements. One of the new changes in the law for 2013 just took effect is if two parents share custody of the child, and the two parents obviously are no longer together, or they never were, and mom, let's say, has the child, and mom wants to relocate. She got a new job. She wants to go from New Orleans to Shreveport. That's more than 150 miles away. She can't just pick up and move with little Johnny, even though little Johnny lives with her. She would have to ask permission of the court. If she can't get an agreement with the dad, mom and dad agree on where Billy's going to live, or Johnny, or whomever, whatever the child's name is, she has to get permission of the court and work out a living arrangement. Now, currently, until the law changed, if you wanted to move from where you currently live to within 150 miles, in other words, you draw a circle from where you live. Anywhere within 150 miles of where you live, you can move, and you can say, I'm going to move from here to there.
Without having to go through the court system?
Normally, you might still have a fight.
And there are different categories. There are different kinds of custody. There's sole custody. There's equal shared custody. There's actually physically half, where each parent has exactly half. And the court looks at those circumstances differently. And again, we don't have the specific sufficient time.
It really depends on the case. You need to consult with a lawyer. But now that circle has been tightened to 75 miles.
Exactly.
So what you could do, with or without a lot of headache, which allowed you to go 150 miles from your current residence to a new residence within 150 miles. Now that circle is tightened to 75 miles. But you want to consult with a lawyer. It's worth the price of the consultation, so you don't get in any trouble, and you don't have any trouble with the judge, or you don't get a letter from another lawyer saying you screwed up and now you're getting ruled into court.
Because there are notice requirements. The parent
you have to give notice. You have to notify the other side.
Sufficient notice. There are different requirements on that, and then different requirements on the parent who's staying to object to the notice. Is
Right.
it timely? Is it appropriate? Et cetera, et cetera.
Okay,
All right.
quickly running out of time here,
Sure,
so let's
Shauna.
get to another one that's very important, and it concerns the Children's Code. Talk a little bit about how the law has changed there.
Shauna, I'm very glad you brought that up because I think this is a very important area given the Super Bowl coming and going.
Yeah.
Representative Abramson has done a fantastic job with respect to the Children's Code and broadly in Louisiana. Louisiana is recognized by Polaris, national organization, ranking Louisiana #1 with respect to child trafficking laws. Specifically, though, Article 606, Paragraph 6 of the Children's Code places a child in need of care if a young, and let me make it very practical, the young girl's arrested or perceived to be, think that the law enforcement believes she should be arrested for engaging in a commercial sex act. She shouldn't be. She should be provided care under 606 of the Children's Code.
So
she's a victim.
She's a victim. She won't be carted off to jail.
She shouldn't be.
She shouldn't be carted off
That's
to
correct.
jail.
So if she's 15, 16 years old, a policeman grabs her because she's accused of being a prostitute or whatever. She's a child. The law reminds the police that you may not treat her like a criminal. She's a child. She's a victim of trafficking, of being a victim of child trafficking. And
That's
she
correct.
is actually placed in the custody as a victim, and that's the way it ought to be.
That's correct. She should be placed in the custody of the Department of Children and Family Services.
Yeah.
You know, ironically, and not to belabor this point, but in Les Mis over the weekend in the movie, when Javert was going to arrest Fontaine for engaging in prostitution, and she was an adult, Jean Valjean said, she needs a doctor, not jail.
Yeah.
Same thing for children.
Same thing for children. And we have to point out this is a very serious problem here in Louisiana
Absolutely.
and across the country. Child sex trafficking, it's a huge, huge problem.
Huge. And as again, with the Super Bowl coming,
Yes.
so will come child trafficking, and so will come these victims.
Okay, well, as we mentioned, we're completely out of time. More than 800, almost 900 new laws on the books. We got a chance to go over some of the bigger ones, I think. And thank you so much for being here and
you,
helping
Shauna.
us to better
Thank you, John.
understand them.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
And thank you all so much for being here. Be sure to join us next week when we will delve into yet another important area of the law and go over some of the important things you need to know about how to make sure your rights are protected.
Thanks so much to my friend John Krentel and to all of you for supporting the show and for getting in touch with us on Twitter, Facebook, and by email. Remember, you can visit us online at jrpoa.com and at any time to watch every episode of the show and to get more information about everything discussed here. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week.